It is the 194th edition of this poker vlog, and I've been in the process of digging myself out of a brutal downswing, though I'll admit I've been kind of, chipping away at it a bit. I guess my policy has been, why make back thousands when you can make back hundreds?
Why make trillions when we could make billions?
I do have the opportunity today to potentially make more money than I've made all year, because the Peppermill is doing an extravaganza of a giveaway, and money is going to be given away all day long, and I am in prime position to make some of it. All right, I think the case for me and pretty much the majority of the players that you've seen in these games over the years here on this vlog is that we're not showing up because there's a bunch of money being given away today. We're showing up because it's a Thursday. Let's just be honest. The money is nice, but I think a mistake that a lot of people make during these kind of drawing days is focusing too much on the fact that there's money being given away and not enough on the quality of the game itself, in terms of how long you stay. So if the game sucks, I'm not gonna stay. However, wouldn't exactly suck to win a couple of these drawings either. I'll first point out that we saw a clash of the Titans earlier this week, with Slick's Pocket Kings taking on Ken Shamrock's Pocket Aces. And Slick, because this is all skill, hit a king on both boards. But Shamrock also hit an ace on the second of those two boards to salvage a chop, the same thing that recently happened to me in a recent vlog. As for this day, the Peppermill is giving back a lot of the bonus tax money, $10,000 to be precise, over the course of 12 hours. 40 $250 drawings that take place all day long. And the more hours you have, the more tickets you get. And fortunately for me, I've got a lot more hours than most people. Not as many as some, but more than quite a few. So I like my chances of hitting it at some point should I play all day. I also remembered to bring this charger because I assumed I'd be stuck on a table where they didn't work, and that proved to be correct. The room was already jam-packed when I showed up at noon with two 5-10s going on, and Slick would be on the list with me. I'm not in the room for 5 minutes before noticing who does win one of the drawings, and that is Reno Grinder. First hand on the day comes playing 5-handed when I pick up Ace-Jack of Hearts in the cutoff and make it 30, with the button being my only color in the straddle. So at 65 in, the board comes out Ace-Deuce-5, 2 clubs, and with top pair, I opt to bet 40 here. Button thinks about it for a second before calling. And with 145 in, the turn comes the 3 of clubs. Obviously a bad card for me, but I need to still be betting here because he's never going to bet a weaker hand, but he will call with plenty of them. So I make it 65, and he thinks about it for a second before calling again. And with 275 in, the river is an offsuit 7. I felt that was a pretty good card for me if I had the best hand on the flop. And on the turn, I figured to still have it here. So I decided to size way down here, hoping to keep his weaker aces, obviously, in this hand. So I just bet 75, planning on folding if he were to come over the top. But he doesn't do that. He starts complaining about how he doesn't like the spot that he's in, but that he has to call. So that creates a $425 pot. I show my hand, and he shows pocket deuces for a flopped set, on which he started off being a trapper, and he quickly shifted to being scared out of his mind. So that's a slight cooler in a full ring game, but a pretty severe cooler in a 5-handed game. With 6 people in the game, I open pocket 10s in the low jack to 30 and the button calls. Slick in the big blind decides to min raise, which I thought was odd, and it's back on me. With pocket 10s here against him, I'm going to come back over the top with a 4 bet. I make it 150. and he doesn't think too long before making the call. And with 330 in, the flop comes 8 high, which obviously I loved. I make a pretty standard bet here, and he turns over the king jack of diamonds and tosses it into the muck. So that hand worked out well, as would this one, which was the rare instance of me putting out a 4-bet with ace king and getting a fold, which almost seems to never occur pre-flop in these games. Something else that rarely occurs is Slick being quiet.
I can't call with a 2-3, man.
My longtime favorite male dealer, Brett, sits down, and it's an opportune moment to point out that I have made the semifinals of his fantasy football league. Take a look at my squad, which is obviously pretty stacked, though unfortunately includes no 49ers. Also, I've decided that every year I'm in Brett's league, I am going to name my team after a line from Pulp Fiction. And this year it's...
Zed's dead, baby. Zed's dead.
I'm in the rock early position, and it folds to the button, who makes it 50 with Slick calling. I have pocket jacks here, and decide to raise to 210. The button then jams all in for 600 more, and this was close. His range of raising on the button should be pretty wide here, and it's going to have a lot of ace-kings and ace-queens in it, but he's also the guy who, in the first hand today, just called a 1/4 pot-sized river bet and complained about it with a set. So, obviously, he's not just in love with the idea of getting chips in all that light if he doesn't have to. And obviously, if he does have ace-king or ace-queen, I still have to win the coin flip. So I never loved the situations where I have to manage to not be dominated and I have to manage to win a flip in the same hand. So I decide to just fold the hand and move on. Then we get an early position raise to 30 with 3 guys calling, and I have pocket aces in the cutoff and make it 145 here. The big blind, who just bought in for this amount, makes the call, and everyone else folds. Basically the last thing that I expected to see. So with 410 in, the flop is 7-7-6, 2 diamonds. I decided to just bet 100 here, hoping that he'd raise me all in, but he doesn't. He just calls. And with 610 in, the turn is the queen of spades, and now he decides to come out and bet. He makes it 175 into 610. Now I know this player well, and it's a virtual certainty that he either has turned a set of queens here or has pocket kings. It's also possible he has the other 2 aces, but I don't think that's too likely for a number of reasons. He's never going to have a 7. That I can tell you for sure. So what the hell should I do here?
What the hell do we do now, sir?
I think it's a little absurd to just fold this hand. So I make this call, figuring I could evaluate the river. So with 960 in, that card comes the deuce of spades, and now he checks. Like I said, I didn't really know what the hell to make of this hand. I just figure I should be sizing way down here, hoping that he somehow has a weaker hand than I'm giving him credit for and will pay me off with it. So that's what I do. I bet 125. As I made the bet, he basically tried to tell me that he's already there. And this player has the reputation of being one of the nicest, most honest type guys in Reno poker. So I had to factor that in too. But it's just like checking back aces here would be the nittiest thing in the history of nittiness. So I couldn't do it. I bet 125, and he says, I'll just call in case you have quads. So that creates a $1,210 pot. I show the hand, and he shows pocket queens for queens full. It wouldn't have mattered if he had raised the river or not, for those of you who want to blast him for that, because I'd already made up my mind I was going to fold if he did put me all in there. But either way, it's just a lousy situation where that turned 2-outer turns what looked to be a promising session for me into a pretty tilting one. Though it did make one of the players in the game, who absolutely loves seeing me lose, very happy. And to add insult to injury, the guy who just beat me then won one of those $250 drawings right afterwards. Almost doesn't seem fair. Many of you may not know this, but the Peppermill actually allows for unlimited rebuys during these cash games. I know it's kind of hard to believe, so I decided to add on $500 to my stack. Given the fact that ace-king tends to be the hand that everyone puts you on in 3-bet pots, and winning decent-sized pots with it generally proves to be an impossibility, I chose to just call a pre-flop raise with it in this next hand. My hope was I could keep aces that I have dominated in the hand and then get an ace high flop. Spoiler alert, I would do just that. However, as I'm talking about with this technique of just calling, it is going to allow other people into the hand with hands that have a shot at me, and sure enough, several others do decide to come along, and we have $145 in the pot, and the flop comes out ace, jack six with 2 clubs. The pre-flop raiser in the under the gun +1 position now checks, and I decide to bet 75 here. The player 2 to my left decides to then make this call, and the cutoff raises to 250 here, and it's back on me. This is obviously a tricky spot. He could easily have a draw here, but obviously he's going to have some 2 pairs as well. I had about 700 left and could easily have the best hand here. The fact that I had the 700 is really a lousy amount to have here. If I just had 300 left, it's an easy all-in. If I had 2,500 behind, it obviously wouldn't be an all-in, and I could try to take this thing street to street like I generally prefer to do. The player that made this raise was having one of those dream days. He had called a 4-bet in a huge pot against a pro and another guy and made a full house in it, winning a massive pot. He had flopped quads and had some guy go all in, and he had made 2 other big hands before that as well. So he just was crushing it on the day, and I knew I had to factor that into this hand. I just wasn't 100% sure how, because it's possible that someone could be crushing the game and would then decide to play a draw very aggressively because they got a whole bunch of money in front of them. However, deep down, I knew that wasn't all that likely. Generally speaking, when guys, and this guy is a great example of it, he just wants to book his win and get out of there. Generally speaking, guys who are crushing, they don't want to risk it. They want to play tighter then and lock up their win. I wish I had convinced myself of that when I decided to jam my $700 into this pot here, thinking that he's not playing a set of sixes this fast. I knew that. He might re-raise ace-jack pre-flop, and he might not play ace-6 at all. That was my thought. But after I jammed the money all in, he then starts thinking about it. And that was my first step, was to fade the snap call here. And truthfully, I was extremely excited that I did fade that snap call, and I thought that I was probably going to win the pot now that I did. He asks for a count and starts thinking about it, and finally, after about 30 seconds, decides to put the rest of the money in, creating about an $1,800 pot. We agree to run it twice, and he does have ace-jack. Obviously, I do not hit a king on either board, and I am felted. You'd think that I'd learn, but I continue to just win microscopic pots with ace-king and lose large ones with it. This is a mid-session update. Somewhere, one of the 7 billion people on the face of the earth is president of the Ace-King fan club. And it's not me. We then saw the game kind of enter the sandbox. 3 players all getting pissed at different things. One gets kicked out for the day, one changes tables, and the other books his massive win and uses the fight as an excuse to leave. It was hilarious. The fact of the matter was, though, the game then got significantly worse afterwards. I did get 2 of 3 streets of value with pocket aces despite an action-killing runout, which I hoped was the start of a comeback at that point. But that came before flopping aces with a jack kicker against aces with a queen kicker against local pro Cleveland Dan, and he got me for about 400 in that spot. So I was just having a miserable day, and despite none of the 3 games being particularly great, I told Rena to put me on the move list, and 20 minutes later, I went to table 1, which, by the way, was nice because the phone chargers did work on that table and allows for better vlogging. My luck almost immediately would turn, as I'd win my first $250 bonus tax refund of the day, with me hitting a drawing upon arriving to that table. As you can barely see on your screen here, I called a $50 raise from the low jack when I'm in the winner's straddle here. I have 6-7 of clubs on the button. Under the gun limp calls this as well. So with 185 in, the board comes out 885 with 2 hearts, giving me an open ender. The original raiser bets 100 here. Playing 1500 effective against him, I'm going to be calling this bet. The interesting thing was that the under the gun limper decides to jam all in for 155 more. The low jack calls the bet. He could have raised me out of the pot, but decided not to. So I complete, and with 650 in, the turn is a beautiful red 4, giving me the straight. Low jack checks, and I decide to bet a little under half the pot here, going 275. Might have been too much for a dry side pot as the low jack folds, and I just roll over the hand to win the main pot as well against the all-in player. The room was absolutely jam-packed at that point. Also, Kayla and Rena came to work in Christmas attire.
What kind of Christmas theme do we have going on here today, ladies?
I wonder.
My goodness.
Santa babies. You know,
Little angels we are.
that's right.
A little later, I'd 3-bet ace-king of spades, and this is going to shock you, but I'd lose the pot. This time against a guy who called with pocket jacks and made quads. The next hand was one where I thought I'd get a third player to come along, but I'd call a 3-bet with ace-jack of clubs, and with 290 in, I got a king-jack-9 flop on which no one bet. The turn was a 10, and again, no betting. The river came another jack, giving me trips. Going to be pretty hard for me to check this one here, so I decide to bet out for 100, and I immediately get raised to 400. Seems like he'd be betting pocket aces on the flop. He wouldn't take this line with ace-king. Queens is a straight, and he could be slow playing kings full. And this is a player who definitely likes to do his fair share of slow playing, so I decided that it was a fold. I didn't get confirmation on it, but I gotta tell you, I felt pretty good about folding that hand in that spot. I then managed to get into a spot against an aggressive player in which I induced a flop raise, and all I had to do to win a $500 pot was to dodge one of 3 remaining aces on the river, and I'll be damned, but I couldn't do it. I then got dealt tens, but only ended up losing $115 when I was up against jacks and ace-queen, which was the hand that ended up winning. So an up and down day, to say the least. The next 2 hours were absolutely miserable. There was a lot of me flopping top pair and a lot of my opponents drilling better top pair or trips on the turn, and we were once again having a lousy day. Though, I did like how ESPN was discussing the dominance of the San Francisco 49ers defense and how teams are 1-12 against them the week after playing them. That didn't really make me feel all that much better on a day where I was booking a decent loss, but hey, I'll take what I can get.
All right, so that session at Peppermill on that Thursday night, certainly an up and down one, to say the least. And in a number of ways, that kind of describes 2022 for me. If you have been with this vlog since last year, you'll remember that I set a simple goal going into 2022, and that was to make more money than I made in 2021. It was a goal that I didn't really know if I could accomplish because 2021 exceeded my wildest expectations for how well things could go for me at a poker table. And I am pleased to announce that I did achieve the goal for this year. And I'm saying that with one more session to be played after this vlog, but I'm not even going to bring enough money to the casino with me that I could lose to play myself out of having achieved that goal, which I almost did, by the way, which I'm going to call pulling a Russell Wilson had I done that, because it feels like he almost has played his way out of the Hall of Fame, given how much of a bust he's been in Denver. But I was so far over my goal going into December, and then I go on a $7,000 downswing, and it's just brutal. So I didn't play myself out of the goal, but I came dangerously close to doing so. And I honestly think that I made more money by booking more losses this year. A change that I've been gradually implementing over the course of the past 7 or 8 years, but usually I've been around 63 to 65% wins when you actually look at every session you play and the percentage of them in which you come out ahead. 63 to 65% is where I've been. And talking to other guys who play for a living, they tend to agree that's usually where you're at. This year, only 61%. So my win rate in terms of winning sessions went down this year, but the overall amount of money I made went up. It's something that I see even good players do. I think I talked about it. I think I kind of slid it in there during this vlog where I saw one guy book his big win after a very short session. And it's something that I used to do, admittedly, but I'm trying to do it less and less. Oftentimes now with me, I have time constraints either way, so I can't really extend them out, even if I wanted to. But for the most part, when I have the ability to extend a winning session, I try to do that, and that has paid off for me in a big way, looking at the results. The one thing I will admit to, though, is yes, I did make more money in 2022 than I did in 2021, but I didn't really make more. What do I mean by that? I made more money at the end of the year, but I made less per hour. I got more hours in this year than I did last year. And that was a couple of different reasons for that. Number one, I broke my wrist back in the end of January. And so in February, I couldn't really parent my son at all. I let my ex-wife have him a lot more. So I just played a lot more poker that month. And that was actually the best month I had of the year was February. And then my son started going to preschool in August. So I got more hours in as a result of that as well. So more hours, hourly rate down from last year, but overall amount of money made up from last year. I'm not going to reveal that amount here. It's just kind of a negative free roll for me to do so. Though I will admit all of those of you who have been with this vlog, I would like for you to know, but it'll get gossiped about around Reno and with people here. I know how it works, so I don't want to deal with that. So the way I always say it is if you really have to know, you can come ask me and maybe I'll tell you. But for the most part, I think most of you are smart enough to be able to come to a reasonable conclusion as to what it might be. But still, I just have to say I'm disappointed in my own game this year. I feel like I just made too many mistakes. Pre-flop in particular, obviously things with ace king continue not to go well for me, but I just felt I played too many hands, particularly before the flop. I mean, there was an instance just this past week where I had won a huge hand, and then the next hand I went on winner's tilt. I hate to admit it, but I did. I went on winner's tilt, and because I had just won this big pot, I said, oh, what the hell? I'll call $75 before the flop with Jack 9 of spades. Again, not the end of the world in the deep stack cash game, but it's the kind of mistake that I've got to get rid of in 2023. And that's going to be my goal. Clean things up pre-flop, because I didn't do as good of a job this year as I could, despite, at the end of the day, it being a record year. All right, obviously, this vlog's coming out a little bit late. We got a bye week kind of worked in here on the vlog because I'm going to Vegas for Niners Raiders. The Niners are only in Vegas once every 7 years, so I do not want to miss this game. And I'm going to be shooting a vlog the day after that as well, and we'll have that for you the following week. We're almost 5 years and 200 vlogs in the books, and I genuinely appreciate those of you who have been with me throughout this journey. If you haven't subscribed yet to this channel, I'd appreciate it if you did so. And if you haven't followed me on Instagram and Twitter, the handles are my name, bendeach, and I look forward to seeing you back here in 2023.
Yeah. I'm like an addict, do I gotta have it. I ain't even playing, got a really bad habit. If it moves, gotta grab it, fuse like a magnet. Lose, won't have it till I'm doomed in a casket. I ain't playing, got a weird mind. If you work 8 hours, I'ma work 9. If the shit tastes sour, you should taste mine. I'ma stay in power for a long time. Get up, nah, I ain't a quitter. Toss me the ball, I'm a really big hitter. Big picture, I'm a straight killer. Rising the song to the highest bidder. Got juice, got gas, I'ma move fast. New shoes, new tracks, like who's that? I'm new.